The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk as the young girl walked past the old community center for what must have been the 100th time. She always slowed down when she reached that particular spot, right where the tall windows revealed the grand piano sitting inside. Today was different, though. Today she stopped completely. Her name was Maya and she was 14 years old. She'd lived in this neighborhood her entire life, in a small apartment above the corner laundry where her mother worked 6 days a week. Her father had left when she was 7, and she barely remembered his face anymore. What she did remember was the sound of music playing from their old radio before everything fell apart. Maya pressed her face closer to the glass, watching as a middle-aged woman inside ran a cloth over the piano's glossy black surface. The instrument seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights like something from another world entirely. She'd never touched a real piano before. The only thing close to it was the dusty keyboard old Mr. Peterson had given her last year when he moved to a nursing home. Half the keys didn't work, and it had to be plugged in with an extension cord. But Maya had taught herself to play on it anyway. Every evening after finishing her homework at the public library, she would spend hours watching piano tutorials on the shared computers. She'd write down notes in the margins of her school notebooks, little reminders about finger positions and chord progressions. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, had noticed her dedication and always made sure to save computer number 3 for her. It was the one with the best speakers. The community center had been organizing a talent showcase, and for weeks, colorful flyers had been plastered all over the neighborhood. Maya had torn one down from the bulletin board at the grocery store 3 weeks ago. It was now folded and unfolded so many times that the creases had started to tear. She kept it in her backpack, taking it out during lunch period at school when she sat alone at the corner table. She'd never performed for anyone before. The thought of standing in front of hundreds of people made her stomach twist into knots. But something about that flyer kept pulling at her, whispering that maybe this was her chance to do something more than just survive each day. Maybe she could actually be someone, even if just for a few minutes. The problem was that the showcase seemed to be designed for a different kind of person. The kind who took private lessons in studios with proper teachers. The kind whose parents could afford to buy them real instruments and drive them to recitals in other cities. Maya had seen some of those kids around town, carrying violin cases that probably cost more than her mother made in a month. Still, the flyer said it was open to everyone in the community. That technically included her, didn't it? Making the decision to sign up had taken every ounce of courage Maya possessed. She'd saved up money from helping neighbors carry groceries and walking dogs after school. It had taken her 2 months to collect enough for the bus fare to get to the registration. Her mother didn't know about any of this. She didn't want to burden her with something that might not even work out. Her mother already worried enough about keeping the lights on and food on the table. On registration day, Maya had taken 3 different buses to reach the Riverside Music Hall on the other side of town. The building was enormous with marble columns and golden doors that looked like they belonged in a movie. She'd never been to this part of the city before. Every person she passed on the street seemed to walk with a different kind of confidence, wearing clothes that looked brand new and carrying shopping bags from stores she'd only seen in advertisements. The inside of the music hall was even more intimidating. The floors were so shiny she could see her reflection in them, and a massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting tiny rainbows across the walls. Maya's worn sneakers squeaked with each step, and she became suddenly aware of how out of place she must look. Her jeans had a patch on one knee where she'd sewn up a tear, and her jacket was 2 sizes too big, a hand-me-down from a cousin she'd never met. The registration table was set up in the main lobby, behind a velvet rope that made it feel even more exclusive. A woman with perfectly styled hair and bright red lipstick sat behind it, sorting through papers with manicured nails. She looked up when Maya approached, and for just a second, something flickered across her face. It might have been surprise or maybe doubt, or perhaps just confusion about what this girl was doing here. "Can I help you, sweetie?" the woman asked, her voice sugary but with an edge underneath. Maya's throat felt dry. "I'd like to sign up for the showcase." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "The talent showcase? Have you performed before?" Maya shook her head. "And what's your instrument?" "Piano." The woman's expression became even more skeptical. "Piano, I see. And where do you study?" "I teach myself," Maya said quietly, feeling her cheeks burn. There was a pause that felt like it lasted forever. The woman glanced at someone behind Maya, and there was the unmistakable sound of muffled laughter. Maya didn't turn around. She kept her eyes fixed on the registration form in front of her. "Well," the woman finally said, sliding a pen across the table. "It's open to everyone, so go ahead and write your name here." As Maya filled out the form with shaking hands, she could hear whispers behind her. A group of teenagers, probably around her age, were standing near the entrance. They wore matching jackets with a Music Academy logo embroidered on the chest. One of them, a girl with blonde hair pulled back in a perfect bun, was looking directly at her and whispering something to her friends. They all giggled. Maya finished writing and handed the form back. The woman barely glanced at it before adding it to a pile. "The showcase is in 2 weeks," she said, her tone suggesting she didn't expect to see Maya again. 7 o'clock. "Don't be late." Maya nodded and turned to leave, walking past the group of academy students. She heard one of them say something about interesting choices this year, followed by more laughter. She pushed through the golden doors and didn't stop walking until she was 3 blocks away, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. What had she just done? The bus ride home felt longer than usual. Maya stared out the window, watching as the fancy neighborhoods gradually transformed back into familiar streets with chain-link fences and corner stores with bars on the windows. She pulled the registration confirmation from her pocket. Her name was printed on it in plain black ink, along with a number, Performer 23. She was really going to do this. That night, Maya practiced on Mr. Peterson's broken keyboard until her fingers ached. She played the piece she'd been working on for months, a classical melody she'd modified with her own changes, adding little flourishes and variations that felt right to her. She didn't know if what she was doing was technically correct. She just knew it sounded beautiful, at least to her ears. Her mother knocked on the door around midnight, asking her to keep it down because the neighbors had work in the morning. Maya apologized and unplugged the keyboard, but she kept practicing in her mind, her fingers moving silently across an imaginary piano as she lay in bed. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to prepare for the most important moment of her life. 2 weeks to prove that she belonged on that stage, even if no one else believed it yet. 2 weeks to show them all what she could do. The 2 weeks had passed in a blur of nervous practice sessions and sleepless nights. Now Maya sat in the back of a crowded auditorium, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. The Riverside Music Hall was even more impressive from the inside than she'd imagined. Red velvet seats stretched in neat rows toward a massive stage, and the ceiling was painted with angels and clouds that seemed to float above everyone's heads. She'd arrived an hour early, taking the same 3 buses she'd taken for registration. This time she wore the only dress she owned, a simple navy blue one that her mother had bought her for 8th grade graduation. Her shoes were the same worn sneakers, but she'd scrubbed them clean the night before until her arms ached. It was the best she could do. The auditorium was filling up quickly. Families arrived in groups, parents with expensive cameras around their necks, younger siblings fidgeting in their Sunday clothes. Maya watched as they found their seats, calling out to friends and waving across the rows. She recognized some of the performers from registration day, all of them surrounded by supporters and well-wishers. Maya's mother couldn't come. She'd wanted to, had even asked her boss for the evening off, but they'd said no. Someone had called in sick and the laundry needed her. Maya had told her it was okay, that she understood, but the truth was that having to walk into this place alone made everything 10 times more terrifying. She'd thought about asking Mrs. Chen from the library, but that felt like too much to ask. The lights dimmed and a man in a suit walked onto the stage. He welcomed everyone and explained how the evening would work. There would be 26 performances total, ranging from classical music to contemporary pieces, from piano to violin to voice. Maya's stomach dropped. 26 performers. She was number 23. That meant she'd have to sit through almost the entire show, watching everyone else before her turn came. The first performer was a boy around 10 years old who played violin. He was small and nervous, but his technique was flawless. His parents beamed from the front row, recording every second. The audience clapped politely when he finished. Then came a girl who sang an opera piece in Italian. Her voice was powerful and controlled, filling every corner of the massive room. Maya felt her confidence shrinking with each passing performance. These people were professionals, or at least trained by professionals. What was she thinking signing up for this? A piano player took the stage next, a teenager maybe a year older than Maya. She wore a beautiful emerald dress and sat at the grand piano with perfect posture. Her performance was technically brilliant, each note precise and clean. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Maya heard someone behind her whisper that the girl studied at the National Conservatory and had won several competitions. Performance after performance, the pattern continued. Each person seemed more polished than the last. A cellist who swayed with emotion as he played. Twin sisters who performed a flute duet that sounded like birds singing. A boy who played guitar and sang, his voice smooth and practiced. Maya's hands started sweating. She wiped them on her dress, then worried she'd leave stains. Her heart was beating so fast she felt dizzy. Maybe she could just leave, slip out the back door and pretend she'd never come. No one would really notice, would they? She was just numbered 23 out of 26. Just another name on a list, but her legs wouldn't move. Something kept her glued to that velvet seat. Even as her brain screamed at her to run, the performances kept coming. Some were good, some were great, and a few were absolutely breathtaking. The audience's energy rose and fell with each act. They clapped politely for everyone, but Maya could tell which performances really moved them. Those were the ones that received standing ovations, the ones that made people wipe their eyes or lean forward in their seats. Finally, after what felt like hours, the announcer called out, "Next, we have performer number 23, Maya Rodriguez." Playing piano, Maya's legs felt like rubber as she stood. She had to grip the seat in front of her for balance. The walk down the aisle toward the stage seemed impossibly long. Every eye in the room was on her, and she became aware of how different she looked from all the other performers. Her simple dress, her clean but obviously old sneakers, her hair pulled back in a basic ponytail because she didn't know how to do anything fancier. She heard the whispers as she walked. They weren't even trying to be quiet. Who's that? Never seen her before. Is she from one of the schools? As she climbed the steps to the stage, her foot caught slightly and she stumbled. Someone in the audience snickered. Maya's face burned hot. She recovered and kept walking, but the damage was done. More whispers rippled through the crowd. The grand piano sat in the center of the stage, gleaming under the bright lights. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Maya had never played on a real grand piano before. Mr. Peterson's broken keyboard didn't even come close to preparing her for this. She sat on the bench and immediately realized it was too low. In all her practice, she'd never thought about adjusting the seat. She tried to do it quickly, but the mechanism was different from what she expected, and it took her several awkward seconds to figure it out. More giggles from the audience. From her position on stage, Maya could see everything. The sea of faces staring at her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases barely hidden amusement. In the third row, she spotted the group from the music academy, the same teenagers who'd laughed at her during registration. The blonde girl with the perfect bun was leaning over to whisper something to her friend, both of them smirking. Maya's hands hovered over the keys. They were shaking so badly she wasn't sure she could even play. The silence in the auditorium grew heavier with each passing second. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted in their seat, the sound of velvet rustling loud in the quiet. "This should be interesting," a voice said from somewhere in the middle rows. It wasn't quite a whisper, more like a loud aside meant to be heard. Several people laughed. "Did anyone check if she actually knows how to play?" Another voice added. More laughter, less restrained this time. Maya's vision blurred. She blinked hard, willing herself not to cry. Not here, not in front of all these people. The announcer was standing in the wings, looking at her with concern, probably wondering if she was going to freeze up completely. In the front row, Maya noticed an older man with gray hair and glasses. He wasn't laughing. He was watching her with a neutral expression, waiting. Something about his patience gave her a tiny thread of courage to hold on to. She looked down at the keys. They were perfectly white and black, arranged in the familiar pattern she'd memorized months ago. This was just a piano. She knew how to play piano. It didn't matter that this one cost more than her family's car. It didn't matter that she'd learned from YouTube videos instead of private lessons. The keys still worked the same way. Maya took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought about all those evenings at the library, writing notes in the margins of her homework. She thought about Mr. Peterson's broken keyboard and how she'd learned to make music on it anyway. She thought about her mother working double shifts at the laundry so Maya could have a better life. The laughter hadn't completely died down. Someone in the back was still making comments, and she could hear the snickers. One of the academy students had pulled out their phone, probably to record what they expected would be an embarrassing disaster they could share with their friends later. The spotlight was hot on her face. The silence was suffocating. The judgment was palpable, but Maya's fingers found the keys, and in that moment everything else disappeared. She forgot about the whispers and the laughter. She forgot about her worn sneakers and simple dress. She forgot about being different, about being an outsider, about not belonging. She remembered only the music. Her fingers pressed down on the first notes, and the sound that filled the auditorium was like nothing anyone there had expected. Rich and clear and full of emotion, it poured out of the grand piano and washed over the crowd like a wave. The laughter stopped. Just like that. In the space of 5 seconds, everything changed. Maya played, and the world held its breath. The transformation happened so quickly that some people in the audience thought they'd imagined the laughter just moments before. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with a fluidity that seemed impossible for someone who'd never had formal training. She was playing a classical piece, something familiar that many in the crowd recognized, but she'd changed it somehow, made it her own. The melody started soft and gentle, like a whisper of wind through leaves. Maya's eyes remained closed, her whole body swaying slightly with the rhythm. She'd practiced this piece hundreds of times on Mr. Peterson's broken keyboard, working around the dead keys, imagining what it would sound like on a real piano. Now, finally hearing it the way it was meant to be played, she felt tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. But she didn't stop. Her fingers found each note with confidence, dancing from the low bass notes to the high treble with a grace that surprised even her. The grand piano responded beautifully, its rich tone filling every corner of the massive auditorium. This wasn't just technical playing. This was something else entirely. In the third row, the blonde girl from the music academy had lowered her phone. Her mouth hung open slightly, the smirk completely gone from her face. The boy next to her, who'd made the comment about checking if Maya could play, sat frozen in his seat, his eyes wide. The older man in the front row with the gray hair leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests. A woman beside him dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, even though the piece had barely begun. Maya transitioned into the second movement, and here's where she added her own touch. She'd watched dozens of jazz pianists on those library computers, studying how they improvised and added their own flair to classical pieces. She'd spent hours figuring out how to blend the two styles together, creating something that honored the original composition while making it uniquely hers. Her left hand maintained the steady classical bass line while her right hand began to add jazz embellishments, little runs and trills that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. It was unconventional. It broke rules that conservatory students spent years learning. But it was honest and real and absolutely beautiful. The silence in the auditorium was complete now. Even the restless children who'd been fidgeting during previous performances sat still, transfixed by what they were hearing. The usual sounds of a crowded room had disappeared. No coughing, no rustling programs, no whispered conversations. Just Maya and the piano and the music flowing between them. She moved into the more complex middle section, her fingers flying across the keys with increasing speed and confidence. This was the part she'd worried about most, the section with the rapid chord progressions that she'd struggled to master on the broken keyboard. But here on this magnificent instrument it felt effortless. The keys responded to her touch perfectly, and she found herself playing even better than she had in practice. Maya poured everything into the performance. Every lonely lunch period sitting by herself at school, every time she'd felt invisible walking through the hallways, every evening spent at the library teaching herself, dreaming of a moment like this. The music became a voice for all the things she'd never been able to say out loud. The piece built in intensity, the volume growing, the tempo increasing. Maya's whole body moved with the music now, leaning into the dramatic moments, pulling back during the softer passages. She wasn't thinking about technique anymore, wasn't worried about hitting the right notes. She was simply feeling the music and letting it flow through her. In row 12, a mother reached for her husband's hand and squeezed it tight. She'd been a pianist herself once before life and responsibilities took over, and she recognized what she was witnessing. This wasn't just a talented kid. This was someone with a gift, raw and unpolished maybe, but undeniably real. The academy student sat in stunned silence. The girl with the perfect bun felt a strange mix of emotions. She'd studied piano for 10 years with expensive private instructors. She could play complicated pieces perfectly, hitting every note exactly as written, but she'd never played like this. Never felt music the way this girl seemed to feel it. For the first time, she wondered if maybe there was more to music than perfect technique. Maya's fingers began to slow as she approached the final movement. She brought the volume down, making the audience lean in to hear the delicate notes. This was the section she'd added the most changes to, transforming the traditional ending into something softer and more emotional. Where the original piece ended with a flourish, Maya's version ended with a gentle, almost melancholic resolution. She played the final phrases with such tenderness that several people in the audience found themselves holding their breath. Each note seemed to hang in the air for a moment before fading away, like stars slowly disappearing at dawn. Maya's touch on the keys was feather-light now, barely pressing down, coaxing out the softest sounds the piano could make. The last note rang out, pure and clear, and Maya let it sustain, her foot on the pedal, allowing the sound to fill the space one final time before it slowly faded into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The auditorium was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Maya kept her eyes closed, her hands still resting on the keys, afraid to open them and face whatever came next. Had she messed up? Had all those changes she'd made been a terrible mistake? The silence stretched on and Maya's heart began to sink. Then she heard it. A single pair of hands clapping, firm, steady, enthusiastic clapping coming from the front row. The older man with gray hair had risen to his feet, applauding with genuine appreciation. Within seconds, the woman next to him stood too, then the people beside her, and then like a wave rolling across the ocean, the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation. The applause wasn't polite or merely encouraging. It was thunderous. People weren't just clapping, they were cheering. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" from the back row. Others joined in. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, completely unexpected. Maya finally opened her eyes, and for a moment she thought she must be dreaming. Everyone was standing. Everyone was clapping. Some people were crying openly. The woman who'd been sitting in row 12 had her hands pressed to her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. The academy students were on their feet too, applauding along with everyone else, shock still visible on their faces. Maya stood shakily, her legs barely able to support her weight. She managed a small bow, her hands trembling at her sides. The applause grew even louder. She looked out at all those faces, no longer judging or skeptical, but genuinely moved by what they'd just witnessed. The announcer stood in the wings, wiping his own eyes. He'd been running this showcase for 15 years and had heard hundreds of performances. This one would stay with him forever. As Maya walked off the stage, her vision blurred with tears, the applause following her all the way into the wings. Her heart was pounding, her mind racing, unable to fully process what had just happened. She'd expected polite clapping at best, embarrassed silence at worst. She'd never imagined this. The red-haired woman from the registration table was waiting backstage, the same woman who'd looked at Maya with such doubt just 2 weeks ago. Her expression was completely different now. She grabbed Maya's hands, squeezing them tight. "That was extraordinary," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Who taught you? Where do you study?" Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I taught myself. I practice at home and watch videos at the library." The woman's eyes went wide and she called over another woman in a dark suit. Then another person joined them, and another. Soon Maya was surrounded by people asking questions, making comments, wanting to know everything about her. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. But through the crowd, Maya caught sight of something that made her breath catch. The gray-haired man from the front row was making his way backstage, and the way people stepped aside for him suggested he was someone important. He had a kind face but serious eyes, and he was walking directly toward her with purpose and determination. Maya's night was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was only just beginning. The gray-haired man reached Maya just as she was trying to answer 3 different questions at once. The crowd of people around her immediately quieted and stepped back slightly, giving him space. He extended his hand with a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Hello, Maya. My name is Dr. Richard Kim, and I teach at the City Conservatory of Music," he said. His voice was gentle but carried authority. "I've been teaching piano for 32 years, and what you just did up there was one of the most remarkable things I've ever witnessed." Maya shook his hand. still feeling like she was floating outside her own body. "Thank you," she managed to say, though her voice came out shaky. Dr. Kim pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. "I know you're probably overwhelmed right now and there are several more performances to go, but I'd very much like to speak with you after the showcase ends." "Would that be all right?" Maya nodded, taking the card with trembling fingers. The man smiled again and returned to his seat, leaving Maya surrounded by people who all seemed to want a piece of her story. The registration woman kept asking about her training, unable to accept that Maya had learned everything on her own. A local journalist who'd been covering the event wanted to interview her. Parents of other performers came up to congratulate her, their faces showing genuine warmth that hadn't been there before. The blonde girl from the music academy approached, her friends hanging back nervously. Up close, she looked younger than Maya had thought, maybe 13 at most. Her perfect bun had a few loose strands now, and her confidence from earlier had completely evaporated. "That was really amazing," she said quietly, not quite meeting Maya's eyes. "I'm sorry about earlier. What we said, I mean. That was wrong." Maya didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to tell this girl exactly how much those comments had hurt, how close she'd come to running off that stage. But looking at her now, seeing the genuine remorse on her face, Maya just nodded. "It's okay," she said, and surprisingly, she meant it. The showcase continued with the final 3 performances, but Maya barely registered them. She sat backstage in a folding chair, her hands still shaking, replaying everything that had just happened. People kept coming back to congratulate her between acts. Even the other performers, the ones who'd spent years in formal training, sought her out to tell her how moved they'd been by her playing. When the showcase finally ended and the last performer took their bow, the announcer returned to the stage to thank everyone for coming. Then he did something unexpected. He asked Maya to come back out. Her heart jumped into her throat as she walked back onto the stage, confused about what was happening. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said, his voice filling the auditorium, "in 15 years of organizing this event, I have never done this before. But tonight we witnessed something truly special. I'd like to ask Maya Rodriguez to take one more bow." The audience erupted in applause again, even louder than before if that was possible. Maya's face burned with a mix of embarrassment and joy. She bowed quickly and rushed off stage, but the applause followed her, lasting nearly a full minute. Dr. Kim found her afterward in the lobby, where families were gathering their things and preparing to leave. He guided her to a quiet corner, away from the crowds. "Maya, I meant what I said earlier. What you have is rare," he began. "Natural talent exists, of course, but what I heard tonight was more than that. You have an emotional depth in your playing that most musicians spend decades trying to develop. The technical skills can be taught, but what you have can't be." Maya listened, her heart pounding. She dreamed about conversations like this, but never truly believed they could happen to someone like her. "I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our conservatory's youth program," Dr. Kim continued. "It includes private lessons twice a week with master instructors, access to our practice rooms and instruments, and participation in our student recitals and competitions. Everything completely free of charge." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do that?" Dr. Kim smiled. "Because students like you are exactly why I became a teacher. You have something special, Maya, but you need guidance to develop it fully. What you've accomplished on your own is impressive, but imagine what you could do with proper training and resources." "I have to ask my mom," Maya said, her mind racing. "She works a lot and I don't know if she can drive me to lessons or if—" "We'll work all of that out," Dr. Kim interrupted gently. "The conservatory has a van that picks up scholarship students from different neighborhoods. We'll make sure transportation isn't a barrier. This is too important." He handed her a folder with information about the program. "Take this home, talk to your mother, and call me next week. There's no pressure, but I hope you'll seriously consider it." After Dr. Kim left, Maya stood in the emptying lobby, clutching the folder like it was made of gold. The journalist found her again and asked if she could take Maya's photo and get some quotes for an article in the community newspaper. Maya agreed, still feeling like she was moving through a dream. As the journalist was finishing up, a woman approached with her phone held out. "I recorded your performance," she said. "I hope that's okay. My daughter studies piano and I wanted her to see it. Would it be all right if I shared it online?" Maya shrugged, not really understanding what that meant. "Sure, I guess." She had no idea that this simple permission would change everything. The 3 bus rides home felt different than they had earlier that evening. Maya kept touching the folder in her lap, making sure it was real. She replayed the performance in her mind, remembering the moment the applause had started, the look on Dr. Kim's face, the way even the people who'd mocked her had ended up on their feet cheering. Her mother was still at work when Maya got home. She made herself a sandwich and sat at their small kitchen table, reading through all the information in the folder. The conservatory offered so much more than just lessons. There were master classes with visiting musicians, opportunities to perform in real concert halls, even potential scholarships for summer music camps. It was past 11 when her mother finally came home, exhausted from her shift. She found Maya still at the table, the folder spread out in front of her. "Mia, why are you still up?" her mother asked, setting down her purse. Then she noticed Maya's dress and remembered. "The showcase. How did it go?" "I'm so sorry I couldn't be there." Maya started to answer, but her voice broke. Suddenly, all the emotions of the evening crashed over her at once. She started crying, big heaving sobs that she couldn't control. Her mother rushed over, alarmed. "What happened? Are you okay?" "They loved it, Mama," Maya managed to say between sobs. "They gave me a standing ovation. And there's this teacher who wants to give me a scholarship." And people were crying. And I played on a real grand piano and it was so beautiful. And her mother pulled her into a tight hug and now she was crying too. They stood there in their tiny kitchen, holding each other and crying tears of joy and relief and hope. Over the next few days, Maya's life began to shift in ways she couldn't have predicted. The woman who'd recorded her performance posted it online with a simple caption: "Self-taught 14-year-old plays piano at community showcase." By Tuesday morning, it had been viewed 10,000 times. By Wednesday evening, 100,000. By Friday, the video had gone viral. News outlets picked up the story. Local reporters came to Maya's school to interview her. The principal, who'd barely known Maya existed before, now paraded her around like a prized student. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be her friend, to sit with her at lunch to hear her story. The academy students who'd mocked her reached out through social media, posting public apologies. The blonde girl sent Maya a long message explaining that she'd been taught to see music as a competition, and watching Maya perform had made her realize she'd forgotten why she'd fallen in love with piano in the first place. But perhaps the most surprising thing happened the following Monday. Maya came home from school to find a truck parked outside her apartment building. 2 men were carefully unloading something large and black and impossibly beautiful. A piano company had seen the viral video and decided to donate a professional upright piano to her family. Maya's mother stood on the sidewalk, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face as the men carefully carried the instrument up the stairs to their apartment. The neighbors came out to watch, applauding as the piano was positioned against the wall of their small living room. It took up a quarter of the space, but neither Maya nor her mother cared. That evening, Maya sat at her new piano and played for hours. The sound was rich and clear and perfect. She thought about Mr. Peterson's broken keyboard still sitting in her bedroom, and she made a promise to herself that she'd never forget where she'd started. Her phone buzzed with another notification. The video had reached 5 million views. People from around the world were commenting, sharing their own stories of overcoming obstacles, of being underestimated, of finding their voice through music. Maya's mother sat on the couch, watching her daughter play, and for the first time in years, she felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. Maybe all those double shifts and sacrifices were leading somewhere beautiful after all. 3 years had passed since that night at the Riverside Music Hall, but Maya still remembered every detail like it had happened yesterday. She was 17 now, and so much had changed that sometimes she had to pinch herself to believe it was all real. The scholarship to the city conservatory had transformed her life in ways she never could have imagined. Dr. Kim had become not just her teacher but a mentor who believed in her even when she doubted herself. Those first few months had been incredibly hard. Maya had to learn proper technique, unlearn some bad habits she'd picked up teaching herself, and catch up on years of music theory that other students had already mastered. There were days when she'd wanted to quit, days when the other students seemed so far ahead that she felt like she'd never catch up. Days when she missed the simplicity of just playing for herself on Mr. Peterson's broken keyboard, when music was pure joy instead of scales and exercises and corrections. But Dr. Kim had been patient with her, never pushing too hard but never letting her give up either. He'd seen something in her that first night, and he was determined to help her develop it. Slowly, painfully, Maya learned to blend her natural talent with technical skill. She learned to read music fluently, to understand the theory behind the beautiful sounds she'd been making instinctively. The viral video had opened doors Maya had never even known existed. A national morning show had invited her to perform, and millions of people had watched from their living rooms as she played. Record labels had reached out wanting to sign her for albums. Corporate sponsors offered endorsement deals. It was overwhelming and exciting and sometimes scary, but Maya's mother had kept her grounded. They still lived in the same small apartment above the laundry, though her mother only worked one job now. Maya had insisted on that when the performance fees started coming in. "You've worked double shifts my whole life, Mama," she'd said. "It's my turn to help now." The donated piano still sat in their living room, played every single day. Maya practiced for hours, working through pieces that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. She'd performed in concert halls across the city, winning competitions and earning praise from critics who'd spent decades reviewing professional musicians. But tonight was different. Tonight was bigger than anything she'd done before. Maya stood backstage at the City Symphony Hall, wearing an elegant black dress that the symphony had provided. Her hair was styled professionally, pulled back in a sophisticated twist. She looked nothing like the nervous 14-year-old in the worn sneakers who'd stumbled onto that stage 3 years ago. But inside, she felt exactly the same butterflies, the same mix of terror and excitement. Tonight she would perform as a featured soloist with the city's full symphony orchestra. Over 2,000 people filled the seats, including music critics from major publications, conservatory directors from around the country, and even a few famous musicians she'd idolized her whole life. Her mother was out there somewhere in the audience, sitting in the third row. Dr. Kim was there too, along with dozens of her fellow students from the conservatory. Mrs. Chen from the library had come, bringing half the library staff with her. Even some of her old neighbors had made the trip to the fancy concert hall, dressed in their Sunday best. The orchestra was already on stage, warming up. Maya could hear the scattered notes and scales, the tuning of strings, the quiet conversations between musicians. In 15 minutes, she'd walk out there and play the most challenging piece of her life. A piano concerto that would test everything she'd learned over the past 3 years. A stage manager knocked on her dressing room door. "5 minutes, Miss Rodriguez." Maya took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror. She thought about that night 3 years ago, about the laughter and the whispers and the moment she'd almost run away. She thought about all the practice sessions, the frustrations, the small victories that had built up to this moment. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "No matter what happens tonight, I'm already proud of you. You've already won." Maya smiled, feeling some of the nervousness ease. She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the stage entrance. The symphony hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the walls were decorated with gold accents that caught the light. The audience filled every seat, programs rustling as people found their pages and read about the evening's performance. When Maya walked onto the stage, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. She'd built a following over the past few years, and many people had come specifically to hear her play. She bowed to the audience, then to the conductor, and finally took her seat at the grand piano positioned at the center of the stage. The conductor raised his baton, and the hall fell silent. Maya placed her hands on the keys, her heart pounding but her mind clear. The conductor's baton fell and the orchestra began. The opening was all strings and woodwinds, building the musical foundation that Maya would soon join. She counted the measures in her head, waiting for her entrance, and then, at exactly the right moment, her fingers touched the keys. The sound that emerged was powerful and confident, her piano voice joining the orchestra in a conversation between instruments. This was nothing like playing alone or even with a small ensemble. This was being part of something massive and beautiful, where every musician had to listen to each other and blend together perfectly. Maya lost herself in the music, just as she always did. But this time, she wasn't alone in her small apartment or at the library or even on stage by herself. She was surrounded by world-class musicians, all of them working together to create something magnificent. The first movement was fast and technically demanding. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, executing runs and trills that she'd practiced thousands of times. The orchestra swelled behind her, then pulled back to let her shine, then surged forward again in perfect synchronization. The second movement was slower, more emotional. Here's where Maya's natural gift showed through. The notes she played weren't just technically correct, they were full of feeling and depth. She thought about her journey, about everyone who'd helped her along the way, and she poured all of that gratitude into the music. In the audience, her mother wiped tears from her eyes. Dr. Kim sat with his hands clasped, a proud smile on his face. Mrs. Chen from the library leaned forward in her seat, marveling at how far Maya had come from those afternoons at the computer. The final movement built to a climax, the entire orchestra playing at full volume while Maya's piano soared above it all. Her hands moved with perfect precision, hitting every note exactly as it should be played. But more than that, she was telling a story through the music. A story about a girl who'd been underestimated, who'd believed in herself anyway, who'd worked harder than anyone thought possible to get to this moment. The final chord rang out, a triumphant sound that filled every corner of the massive hall. The conductor held his arms up, sustaining the note for a long moment before finally lowering them to signal the end. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the audience exploded. Everyone was on their feet immediately, applauding and cheering. The orchestra members were standing too, turning to face Maya and adding their applause to the audience's. The conductor gestured for Maya to stand, and when she did, the applause grew even louder. Maya bowed once, twice, 3 times. The conductor shook her hand, then hugged her, whispering "brava" in her ear. The concertmaster of the orchestra stepped forward and handed her a bouquet of red roses. The applause continued for over 5 minutes. Finally, Maya walked off stage, her arms full of flowers, her heart full of joy. Dr. Kim was waiting in the wings, beaming with pride. "You did it," he said simply. "That was perfection." But Maya shook her head. "It wasn't perfection. There were a couple of spots in the second movement where I rushed slightly." Dr. Kim laughed. "Maya, you've learned all the technical skills I can teach you, but never lose that thing you had from the beginning. That honesty, that emotion, that's what makes you special." Later at the reception, Maya was surrounded by people congratulating her, asking for photos, wanting to discuss future performances. Record company executives talked about album deals. Concert hall managers discussed booking her for their venues. It was everything she'd once dreamed about and more. But the moment that mattered most came when her mother finally made her way through the crowd and pulled Maya into a tight embrace. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered. Maya held her mother close, finally allowing herself to cry. Happy tears this time, tears of accomplishment and joy and relief. Someone asked Maya for an interview, wanting to know the secret to her success. Maya thought about it for a moment before answering. "I think the secret is remembering why you started," she said. "I didn't start playing piano because I wanted to be famous or because I thought it would lead to scholarships or concert halls. I started because I loved music, because it made me feel less alone, because it gave me a way to express things I couldn't say with words." She paused, looking around the elegant reception room filled with successful, important people. "All of this is wonderful and I'm grateful for every opportunity. But at the end of the day, I'm still just a girl who loves to play piano. That's never changed, and I hope it never will." The interviewer smiled and scribbled notes. But Maya had already moved on, looking for Dr. Kim to thank him one more time, looking for Mrs. Chen to give her a hug, looking for all the people who'd believed in her when she'd been just another kid in worn sneakers touching a piano for the first time. That night, lying in her bed in the same small apartment she'd always known, Maya thought about how far she'd come. From teaching herself on a broken keyboard to performing with a full symphony orchestra, from being laughed at to receiving standing ovations, from being invisible to being seen. But the thing she was most proud of wasn't the success or the recognition. It was that she'd stayed true to herself through all of it. She'd never forgotten where she came from or who'd helped her along the way. She'd never lost the pure love of music that had started this whole journey. Her phone buzzed one last time before she fell asleep. It was a message from the blonde girl from the music academy, the one who'd mocked her 3 years ago. They'd become friends since then, bonding over their shared love of piano. The message said, You inspired me tonight to remember why I fell in love with music. Thank you for that. Maya smiled and set her phone down. Tomorrow there would be more interviews, more opportunities, more challenges to face. But tonight, she just wanted to rest and feel grateful. She'd proven that talent and hard work could overcome almost anything. That being different wasn't a weakness but a strength. That the girl who'd been laughed at for touching the piano could grow into a woman who made the whole world stop and listen. And the music played on.